He mihi tēnei ke whakatūwhera tēnei hui. E io nau I hangia tēnei au marama mō tātou. He kiho kia rangi, rawa ko pāpā, mena atua, nei rā te mihi kia koutou e. Mihi atu kina ahi kāroa ko Aotearoa, ko Papakanui a Maui, ko Hawaii nei, me nā maunga, nā awa, nā ahi kāroa ki konei. Mihi atu ki a koe, mō tō mahi, tō nākau, tō kōrero, no harikoa ahau ki te kōrero tahi, pai ake tō mahi.
Kia ora, me atu tono, ke mihi kia nui o nā tangata whenua o Nonga Boja mō ko o ōku tīpuna. Noho mai nā atua me nā tūpuna, kua oho o aroha, o taua kōrero.
Like, no hea koe, like where are you from and what are maybe some of those po or those supports that you that do infuse your mahi?
Ko take te mutu ko wakatapu, ko momo kai toko maunga, ko nuhaka me ngā mohaka oku awa, ko Ngāti Kahungungu, Ngāti Rongomoe wahine, Ngāti Pāhuera, and rangatane oku iwi. No fielding hau, e tipu aku au I fielding. E noho ana mai anai nei Perth, Western Australia, Nonga Boja. So I grew up as in a mixed race household, I guess, a Māori father and a non-Māori mother. But I always felt more drawn to my Māori family initially. That's changed as I've gone over and learned a lot more about my own whakapapa on both sides. But when I was a child, I don't know, I was like hungry for everything Māoritanga. Like my auntie once told me they've got a video, I haven't seen it as an adult, but of me, was at one of the sharing gang competitions when they used to share the sheep. And my grandparents were like, they would cut scrub and do sharing and all this sort of thing. And I was literally like clinging to my nan, like I couldn't get enough of her. So I'd say she's one of my po. Po in terms of my mahi and this work has shifted and changed. And it has, I feel like the Māori tanga and te ao Māori is such the foundation of everything that I do, but that also evolves for me.
So I know that you've been hosting this healing series now. Curious what inspired you to?
Yeah, I wanted to capture the essence of the powerful mahi that we're all doing. Yet I witnessed that in my own journey. Sometimes hearing one sentence is such a gift. It opens up so much in terms of my abilities or what I can share. I had the desire to set the foundations for where I wanted to go with this mahi. And I felt like I didn't want to speak to lots of the things that we got to speak about in the Kōrero MiriMiri in terms of like, we know that, but maybe those who are really interested in walking into that space don't know some of those foundational aspects of Māori healing and where they come from. Yet in my own journey, I don't want to speak there at the moment. I wanted to sort of expand my energy and go to where I am. But on the other side, I also felt the uprising and the energy of Māori healing and Māori energy globally. I could sense a shift in the way it was being received by my clients, but also people online. And I knew that as a collective, we're somehow more powerful.
And I know we all have these different kuwaha or doorways that open in our lives. I'm curious about what doorways opened up for you.
So I'm not sure what year it was, maybe 2008. I randomly saw a post from Atarangi and Manu about Māori healing training that they were doing here in Perth. And I wasn't really thinking that that was something I would do at that time. I just was curious, you know that feeling. And I remember being so nervous. I was like, I think I showed up late. I was just like agitated. I was looking for my phone number or something, and and that agitated wairua feeling when you're like, something's gonna happen. But I didn't have that awareness right then. I attended that training then. And then I sort of went back to my life. I didn't do much with it at that time. And it wasn't until maybe 2012, and I experienced quite a few different traumatic things at that time, and it's all swished together, so I'm not entirely sure of the timeline. But my dad had a brain aneurysm, and at the same, he went into a coma for 6 days, I think. And at the same time, my koro, my Gamps in New Zealand, was in a coma. I also had a miscarriage and a breakup around that time. And so it was like I'd been pushing my tupuna away. It's sort of, not that I wasn't listening, I was sort of listening, but it was more if I was in trouble, like, oh, stuff's bad, like help. And suddenly it was like all the walls just fell down and I couldn't ignore what was happening, and it was really full on. Yeah, so after that, it was like all these synchronicities just kept happening. So people would randomly ask me if I was a healer, and people began, I was sharing things on Facebook that were just about my journey, and people began asking me to coach them, and it sort of opened from there. Like
just the natural birth of the healer. Yeah, how would you describe the spiritual aspect of MiriMiri? Yeah, as a bridge person who's sharing your spiritual reality of working with your spiritual family. And
it is really beautiful, a beautiful healing process, and one of the most powerful that I've seen or experienced in both my own healing, but also in the healing of those who come on the table or the floor. Interesting. I recently had a woman sort of review my website, and one of the things, and she's not the first one to say this, but one of the things that came up was that translating Māori words, I find that hard sometimes, and it's not from my lack of desire to share with you what I know, but it's like it can't be contained within English. And the practice can't be contained within the way spirituality is discussed within a Western context. And the experience can't be explained in a framework. It's magic, and it weaves differently for each person. And it is what you're calling in at that moment and what you're working on. But in a spiritual context, I see Māoritanga and spirituality and our wairua is just humanness. It's actually not separate. It's all the same. And so this is just a practice to get us to be more human.
I also love in your answer, it just reminds me of those kaumātua who answer a question with another question. Just in hearing that, how complete your answer feels of, describing spirituality, but it doesn't actually fit into this paradigm. And that's a specific way you did. It has the effect of suddenly widening, my view and in receiving and hearing your words.
I'm quite, and even in the way that I teach, I feel I'm quite Māori in the way, I'm quite how I was taught. Like there was no, you never ever got a response. Oh, I never ever got a response to anything. There's another line tomorrow, like no, go and pick some poo or whatever. Like it was never like the learning is not to an adult. You're like, oh my God, these gifts and these seeds that I was given, but I was never given a direct answer to anything.
It's funny what that fuels in us, because recently I asked a queer a question and she said, no, it only means this. And I felt so disheartened of like, oh, that's the end of the line. And thinking, no.
And it's so funny sometimes when I listen back on these talks that I do, and I'm like, oh, that's completely opposite from what I said last time. But it's what's true based on the way the question was framed. But the question from an English perspective could be the same question. So it's like, I get why people get confused.
You're in that both the resonance of language and you as a healer reading what the person's really asking beneath the question. And so I'm just curious, like, where you sit right now and how like your journey is informing you in both as a bridge person and as a Māori wahine.
I also feel really lucky for what I've gained by coming from two different cultural backgrounds. Like I feel blessed to have had that upbringing, to be able to navigate these worlds. It is a privilege, but it's also a blessing. And I think people who come from multiple cultures probably feel the same. But there is a grief that's inevitable within the process of colonization and the energetics of that, and the resulting actions that people had to take or felt they had to take or were forced to take, and all that energy and their mana that suffered from that. I don't think as a species we can fully heal until we acknowledge that, every single one of us, that colonizer and the colonized within us.
Yeah, being born with that Māori identity, and then when you did a whiteness course in university and connecting that with the white privilege, and you know, at this time right now, while we're really going through these really big cultural awakenings, part of anti-racism is also the deep respect and love of culture at the same time.
I became, I would say, more of a responsible Māori person actually being on Noongar Puja, my involvement with Aboriginal people here, because of their history with the stolen generation and whiteness and accepting people regardless of their colour. I actually found a huge healing in that, because growing up as the white Māori girl, you know, sometimes I was really like confused about my identity in that way. But as in terms of what is happening now, I feel very white in terms of colour and Māori in terms of heart. I feel that it's important to acknowledge my privilege, because I honestly, it was really funny doing that whiteness course, because but I hadn't clicked that I was white. But then when I learned privilege, so like understanding that colour and the experiences you have because of your colour and your culture, they're actually two different things, even though often the experiences of persecution that come from colour does inform culture. That the whanaungatanga and things like that is because we had to survive on our own. And so we had to support each other. There wasn't that support from the other systems. And that is culture, which I have, that I believe in, and I can't help but practice because I grew up within that culture. But I also have the option to jump in and out of the waka. And that's a privilege to be able to do that. So it's complex.
Yeah.
But what I feel about this time right now is that from an energetic standpoint, any energy that's not any energy that's repressed has to be expressed. So I'm actually happy it's happening out on the streets rather than in individual people's families and their own lives. You know, the harm that holding that trauma in your body holds. I think that it's being expressed, and as what sometimes sensitive white people, our cultural inheritance is that we don't talk about things that are hard and difficult. We talk around things. We're very good at articulating things in a way that's not direct. And right now we can't help but speak directly.
And sort of what you're talking about, like jumping in and off the waka, the privilege of, and I know this is true for generations above us as well, of not having to identify, like being able to hide the cultural identity, but also the shame that is on the inside when we do that. Or even if, you know, with your Māori heart, if we can jump off the waka and then identify as a white person or a bridge person, there's still that that piece inside of us that's not being able to be seen. So yeah, just really appreciating what you're talking about too, about being able to lift this out of the body and get it out in the open. And I know that we've talked before about ancestral blessing and ancestral messing.
I want to acknowledge that my journey with the concept of ancestral messing actually came from my work in South Africa that I was doing with a healer there. And they have the view that different lineages can have different objectives for you as a person. And the way that the tipuna are guiding you, it's almost how they were describing it, is that it's not always helping you to align. At the same time, I think that thought for me interacted with the thing my nan always said to me, which is why I think I've never been scared of spirit. But nan was always like, you've got a body, you're alive, you tell them what to do. You know, she was really clear on that. And so, but I'd also grown up with like such reverence and respect for my tupuna. It was always like, even though despite when you heard stories and you were like, ooh, that there was still that deep respect, and I still have that. But I think that respect overpowered some of the healing that needed to be done in my lines, some of the acknowledgement of the complexity of how I came to be. And whiteness has been in my family since colonization. Many of my tupuna were, you know, came from that settlement process and the gifting of women to Pākehā men and things like that, and the pain and everything that's mixed in with that. So for me, it was this journey through the lines, through the whakapapa, both on a spirit level, but also on an understanding of, they're not these gods. They are also, I see it as like they're ascending as we ascend in a way, like as we heal and we shift, they heal and they shift, and then they're able to gift their mana to us once they feel that their message has been heard. And when I mentioned earlier around that time where suddenly my tupuna were really talking to me, it was quite full on, but they were saying some of them were saying they had never met me because I hadn't been in a space to receive them, that they needed their story to be told. And it's really cool because my sister's a historian. She's used to work for the Waitangi Tribunal. She works here now. But at that time, you know, she had access to those databases, and I would tell her what I was being told, and then she would go and find the story for us. And it's been so healing for us as a family. It's made me see that we're also in collaboration with our tupuna. It's like they're still a bit more maybe pure than humans in some ways, but they're also not completely enlightened either. Blessing and messing can sometimes be the discernment again of, is this message for me? Is this message for me now?
I loved what you said about how they gift us mana when we're ready to receive it. Yeah, and when you said that, I really wondered if part of that being more pure is just more that they're no longer in te ao tangata, except that they live through us and through the whakapapa. Now in te ao wairua. Do you have another word for that? That sort of alignment, or, you know, what would it look like? What would be the opposite look like if someone felt was really aligned and embracing of their cultural identity?
For me, I feel like it's that just your mana, the mana that you're holding, like, and your manawa, and when you have your internal strength aligned so that it can be recognized and accepted by your community, because sometimes it's not just within the body, it's the flow in and out of the body, and the way that the power comes forth, whether it's a power over others or a collaboration with others or a recognition of like you're in your mana also, and I'm in my mana, and that's safe. And so energy is not just flowing in the body, but when there's this attempt for it to come out of the body.
Yeah, and so that's where we're really headed, is this place of being able to embrace our own mana and be one another's mana.
Yeah. And I realized that in my journey, that I feel the most comfortable in people who are comfortable in themselves. That requires you to be in your mana. And I feel uplifted when you're in your mana. And it uplifts me, and I have more capacity and my inspiration's happening. When someone is holding that back, it's almost an uncomfortability. It's like, something's off.
And that feels like such an answer to the times right now too, because I'm hearing this sort of statement coming across of we all need to go back to being one culture. And for me, that feels so intensely sad. That's sort of assimilating, and so really what you're speaking so clearly of, like if everyone was to stand in their mana.
When people say, oh, we're all the same, or I don't see colour, first of all, it's like disregarding a total experience of a culture that is a and which culture wins in terms of the sameness. And what are we losing as a world? Like even from a food perspective, like if I had to eat English food, meat and 3 veg every day, I would be bored as, you know. What diversity brings us is divine. I get on the higher levels, like when we are fully in our expanded, like when we're, you know, journeying through the Whakamanatia and we're in our expanded consciousness, like we are all one and it is the same, but that's not what we're dealing with right now. Yeah, and there's always multiple truths, right?
In your trainings, when you teach, you also talk a lot about the power of authenticity.
And I think there's 2 types of healers. There's one who is here to maintain the codes of the traditional path, and then there's one here who's more of a code collector. They're 2 different energetics of being, in a way, and I'm more one who is about us all expressing our own strength and power in the way that it needs to move through us. And I see, both in the trainees that I have, but also in other healers, that we all collect or attract or magnify different types of beings or different types of people. And so if you're trying to copy me or another healer, you're not going to be in full alignment of how energy wants to work with you, or your tupuna wants to work with you, or kaitiaki want to work with you. And the beauty of us having different backgrounds and nationalities and energy sources, and even hearing energy or spirit or source in different ways, is that it works differently with you. How I hear or sense or smell is going to not be the way you hear or sense or smell, but I can share my experience in the hope that that expands your understanding of what is possible.
Yeah, and I think that's actually quite a mature role of looking at how we uphold tikanga and also make it really authentic to us. We're no longer in relationship with the material. We're just, you know, as soon as we take it verbatim, we're no longer connected to it. And that, so just hearing how you support people to really allow those teachings to flow through them, be real.
Yeah, and even if you think about how tohunga or people learn traditionally, back in the day, it wasn't that they were giving a course outline and to here's the points on the body and this is what you do. They were in wānanga constantly, and even how we learned from our grandparents, it was very, like, you just picked up bits stuck and bits didn't, right? So I feel I teach in a very indigenous way, but also trying to place a framework around it to acknowledge the Western context in which we exist.
Yes, and so you're also teaching in a way that really considers our modern way of learning from books and texts. And
yeah, it's a constant, it's similar to that colonizer, non-colonizer dance. It's sort of a constant dance of acknowledging that I like that as well. It helps me, because there's codes in everything, right? There's activations in everything. So there can be activations in an image or a word, and we all learn in different ways. So my goal is to have as many activated healers as possible, because our world bloody needs them. You know, so I'm like, that's my goal. So in the many ways that I can reach the people to step into that space in whatever capacity they need to, that's what I'm moving towards.